I'm really excited to be here. This is the second time I've been here. Was anybody here the first time I spoke a couple of years ago? Good. I say exactly the same thing and nobody will know. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about my experience. It's really been an interesting journey that I've been on. I started out as a software engineer. And a lot of people ask me, how did you decide to go into computer science and software engineering? And this is the simple truth. I was walking across the quad over here. Is that what it's still called between the library and the administration building? Quad. Walking across there one day, and I saw one of my buddies from my mission. I said, hey, what are you studying? And he says, computer science. You got to get into it. It's really hot. There's this new thing called the IBM PC that just came out, 1981. And he says, this is going to be really a great space to be in. So I said, what the heck, I'll go do that. I'd never touched a computer, seen one. Actually, the first IBM PC was just coming out. Had 2 awesome floppy drives. It was pretty great. And I remember the first PC that I ever saw that had a hard drive, 12 megabytes. And it was so awesome. Everybody was just shocked that they could find something that would store that much data. And so I've kind of grown up with the industry and saw a lot of the changes that you guys take for granted today, and 16 gigabytes on a little stick. That was just unheard of in the day. But I was really fortunate when I came out of school to get a job at Novell down here, and it was really kind of dominating the industry and really taking off. And I got in and was doing about $50 million in revenue, and I was with it all the way up to about $1 billion in revenue. And it was growing so fast that you just kind of got thrown into new opportunities and responsibilities. And I was really fortunate to work with a guy by the name of Ray Norda, who was just one of the great entrepreneurs of the computer industry and really kind of drove this network computing concept. And I really learned a lot about business from him. I got to work right with him. And he just taught me a lot of great things about what to do and what not to do. And he was a stickler for expenses. If you're starting up a company and you think you can just spend money like crazy, you're mistaken, because you'll end up going out of business really quick. We'll talk some more about that later. But whenever you flew on a flight with Ray, you had to make sure you had the cheapest ticket on the planet. You couldn't even upgrade to first class for free, because if you did and he saw you in first class, he just assumed you bought a first class ticket, and then you got put in the doghouse for a while. He was tough. Whenever you drove a car, if you weren't driving like the crummiest Ford Pinto station wagon from the rental car agency, you were in trouble. He went over the top a little bit on some of that stuff, but he was trying to tell us how important it was to watch expenses in your business. Because every dollar you spent on frivolous thing was one less dollar you could spend on really driving your business. So I think that's probably one of the best things I ever learned from Ray, was be careful about how you spend your money, because whether it's from investors out of your own pocket or from operations, those are really precious dollars, and you got to watch every dime you spend, how you spend it, and if I put $1 in, can I get 5 out? And so really, instead of spending money, you're looking at how you can invest. So that was one of the great things I learned from Ray. The other thing I learned from Ray Norda, he always took pretty ordinary people and gave them a great opportunity and then let them sink or swim. And he did that with me a bunch of times. We had a real challenge with our customer service, and he took me and he walked in my office one day and he says, you're going to be in charge of that now. And I go, I've never done that before. He says, I don't care. Get over there, figure it out, see what's wrong, and get it fixed. So I went over there, got a few people empowered, and we did a great job with that. And guess what? About 2 years later, he says, okay, I got another problem I want you to fix. And he put me on that. And it just kind of went from one to the other. And so one of the things I learned is, even if you don't know exactly what you're doing in an area, you can work at it, get good people around you, and you can figure it out, and you can turn things around. And the better you are at taking a challenging problem, in fact, I would take a challenging problem over an easy one any day, because the chances for success, I think, are a lot better if you're in a really challenging environment. But you can put really good people in on those kinds of problems, and they will get in there and work and solve them, and then you keep putting them on. And so one of the philosophies that I have is you always put your best person on your biggest opportunity. Not your biggest problem necessarily, but your biggest opportunity. And as you build your own businesses, think about that. If you're trying to to execute sales in a particular area and it's not doing well, find the best person you can and put them on that problem. Let them go after it, and if it's an opportunity, they'll make it into even bigger and better than what you may think that you have. Well, over my time at Novell, I did a lot of different things, and eventually I kind of got to the end. Ray retired, and he left, and all he was doing was investing in companies. And I got a phone call from him one day, and he says, hey, Jan, do you want to come and start a company, and I'll fund it? And that was the weirdest phone call I ever got. I never thought I would go start a company. I thought I'd be at Novell for a long time. And he said, I'd be interested in funding a company. I go, well, what kind of company? He goes, I don't know. I'm like, are you serious? He goes, yeah. He says, come up with an idea and I'll fund you. Why do you think he did that? Because he knew who I was. He had experience with me and knew that I would work hard to solve a problem. And one time I asked Ray, I said, how do you determine what companies you invest in? And he said this, the people. I says, you don't look at the technology? He says, no, the technology, that's going to change. In fact, he says your business model will probably change 3 times from the time you start to the time you exit your business. So the most important thing is you have a great team that knows how to execute and can pivot and change, because the industry is going to change out from under them a couple of times, and they need to know how to change and deal with that. And so that's another thing I learned from Ray, is always invest in people, not technology. Those things are important. You got to have good products and a good space to work in, but make sure you really become the kind of people that someone would want to invest in. You're smart, willing to change, willing to move, and you sense opportunities and you can go after them. So anyway, I told Ray, I said, well, I've got an idea. And let me tell you a problem that I see with a lot of technology firms. A lot of people will build a technology and then they'll go look for a problem to solve. That is backwards from the way you need to approach it. The way you need to approach it, a business is there a pain point somewhere that someone's willing to pay to solve? And so don't build technology that's looking for a problem. Find a problem and build something that solves the problem. I've seen people start businesses by going to someone they know and saying, in a business, and say, tell me something that's really painful for you guys. Tell me something that's difficult, that you hate dealing with, that if you could fix it, you would pay money for it. And they'll give you all kinds of ideas. And then you can validate it across several different businesses. And if you find that a lot of people are dealing with that same thing, you got a pretty interesting business. Sometimes you'll drop into it like a Facebook, you know. They start out with some basic little idea, and it starts getting some traction and attention, and all of a sudden it just kind of takes on a life of its own. Well, when I was at Novell, I was over testing, and one of the things that we did was we built a really large testing lab. And in the day, it was how many computers can you put on a network and support with a single operating system and a server, and it was kind of archaic compared to what we're doing today with the cloud and everything. But one of the things that we did is we built this big lab, and then we would test our products in there because we had to validate that it would work in these large networked environments with a lot of different hardware, different applications, et cetera. So we built that. What we found was there was a lot of people that they didn't want to go to the expense to build that same lab out. So what they did was they would come in and pay us to use our lab. And we would let them use it on one condition, and that is their product had to be based on the NetWare operating system, or it was developed for the NetWare operating system. And so there was a lot of people that came in and used it. But there were a lot of people that couldn't use it because they had products that weren't built specifically for network. And I was sitting there one day and I go, man, that sounds like a business opportunity. And so we came up with the idea. When Ray finally came to us and said, hey, I'll give you some money to build a company, I thought, you know what, we could take that same concept, put it out in the open market and say, anybody wants to test their systems in this large networked environment, we've got hundreds of PCs, and we can test your systems across all these different hardware platforms, applications, operating systems, et cetera. And that's how we came up with the idea of Key Labs. And I think the hardest part of any business is actually finding a name for it. If you can find a name for your business that's not, the URL has not already been taken, good luck, grab it, take it, and run, and just start your business. Even if it's the dorkiest name ever, just come up with it, get going. Some people spend thousands of dollars coming up with a name. Don't do that. Just come up with a cool name on your own. And people always wonder what it means. I'll tell you a story about that in a bit. Because that's it's part of the lore of your company, where the company name came from. Anyway, so we got going on this business, and we started getting some pretty good traction. In fact, the way it started, I left Novell on a Friday. I started at Key Labs on Monday. Ray Norda gave us $2.5 million on a handshake. Now, you won't get any VC deals like that, unfortunately. But since he knew us, he said, just go ahead and get started, and we'll paper this thing and get it going later. So he gave us $2.5 million. We went, and I hired 2 other guys to come with me, so there were 3 of us to start with. And we got into this business and started working. We had to build out this lab. We had to get a facility. We had to get the software. We had a lot of work to do. But we wanted to do it really efficiently. So we did everything ourselves. We emptied the trash. We cleaned the bathrooms. We did it all. And that's how you got to start a business. You can't spend a lot of extra money on things that are superfluous to your core, your main business. So we got that business going, and it was pretty exciting. We started on January 15th. We got our first customer in April. And that was pretty exciting. Somebody actually was willing to pay us to test their products. And we were like, okay, we figured this out. We started going, and our business started to ramp up. Every month was getting a little bigger and a little bigger. So we started to decide, hey, we got to double down and hire some more people. We got to about October, and October was one of our best months ever. And so we thought, well, we got to hire more people. So we started hiring. November came, and we did about half the revenue we did the month before. And December came, and we made I think we'd done about 80 grand in October. And in December, we did $3,000 in revenue that month. That was pretty scary. And we were running out of money. I'm like, going, oh, what are we going to do? So I go to Ray Norda, and I said, hey, would you allow me to lend the company some money? And he goes, I would love for you to put some of your money into this company. I go, would you pay me interest? He says, absolutely. He says, but I want you to have some skin in the game. And so I got some skin in the game really quick because I had to float payroll one time. And until you floated payroll for 20 people, you haven't lived. It's pretty exciting because your wife's going, where did you just take that $65,000 that took a long time for us to make? Oh, I just gave it to a bunch of people that work for us. Oh, nice. So we're not going to eat next month. Maybe not. That's a little scary. But it's kind of, it gets you excited about the business, and you're going to figure out what to do. Lucky for us, January was our biggest month ever, and then it just took off from there. So what I learned is you got to have a good plan, you got to stick with it, you got to get skin in the game, and you got to work your tail off to make it work. Whatever it takes, you got to get out and hustle to make that business go. Well, one of the things that was really interesting about the Key Labs business, it's a service business, so it takes a lot of people, a lot of effort. I wouldn't necessarily give you the idea that a service business is the easiest way to go. It's a lot of work. It's really people intensive. Anytime you can use technology to scale your business, do it. That's why software companies are so valuable because the margins are so high in those businesses. 98% gross margin, almost 100% gross margin in software companies because there's just no cost of goods in building those things, building software. Anyway, we got going, and we'd been in a year or so, and we were starting to make some pretty good money at this business. And we had a company come when we were doing about, $5 million in revenue. We had a company come in, and they offered us $19 million for that company. And we're looking at a service business, so this is like 1990, 97, into 97, first part of 98. And Ray Norda got involved in the deal because he owned a lot of the stock in the company. And he says, guys, this isn't enough. And we're just like going, are you serious? This is $19 million. We're doing $5 million in revenue. It's more than 3 times our revenue. He goes, no, we can get more. I'm just telling you, when you've never sold a company or made more than like 50 grand in a year, you're like going, I like the idea of maybe making $1 million right now. He says, we can do better. 2 weeks later, we had a company come in. So we listened to him. We said, okay, we're not interested. 2 weeks later, company comes in. They offer us $29 million. And so we run in. We're all excited. We're high-fiving. We tell Ray Norda, and he goes, guys, we can do better than this. Like, are you? No way. Yeah, we can do better, and we're not selling the company. And so we're over on our calculator just watching, millions of dollars go out the door. Okay, we'll stick with it. 2 weeks later, $42 million offer. At that point, we were doing this to Ray Norda, The guy was just a genius. I don't know if he can predict the future, but the thing that was amazing to me with patience and really understanding what was out there, and we did some work to kind of get this in front of a few people, but we sold the company to this company for $42 million. By the time we got the deal done, their stock, it was a stock deal. They were giving us their stock. The stock climbed from $80 a share to $170 a share. So we ended up selling the company for about $80 million on $5 million in revenue. That doesn't happen very often, but we were pretty excited about that. Now, what's funny about the company that bought us, a year and a half later, they filed for bankruptcy. Fortunate for us, we got all our stock out of there, and that was a happy day for us. The cool thing is one of my partners, went back into the company after it was bankrupt and bought the company back. And the guy, he was negotiating with them. They said, what will you pay us for the company, which they just paid $82 million for. He opened his wallet. He had $150 in his pocket. He gave them the $150, told them they could keep 20% of the company, and he bought the company back. Best deal ever. And then he sold it again for $7 million about a year later. Not bad. I don't know what the guy was thinking that when he opened his pot, there was $150 in there. He said, okay, I'll take that. I don't get that methodology, but it worked. One of the things that happened at Key Labs, which was kind of magical, and this is where things got really crazy, was when we were building out our lab, one of the things that we had to do is we had to develop a technology that would allow us to deploy software on computers really quickly. So we have several hundred PCs in this lab, and we could have a customer come in the morning and say, I need this configuration, and I need that set up on all these machines. And in the afternoon, another customer could come in and say, I need this configuration on these to And so we had to find a way to figure that out. So we came up with some disk imaging software. You're probably familiar with Ghost or Drive Image or some of those. So we developed some technology like that. And some management tools around it, so you could set a console and say, I want these machines to be imaged with this software, and you could create an image and where you went. Well, one day, we had the guys from Intel come in to our shop. We'd been doing some testing for them. And they said, how do you guys get software on all these machines? And they said, let's show you. And our guy walks over and he pushes this button, and these things, all these machines get imaged in like 10 minutes with a full Windows operating system, applications, everything. These guys from Intel are you kidding me? So we went up to their place, and what they did is they had this thing they called COWs, clients on wheels, and they had all this thing they'd pull up, they'd rip the drive out of the machine, slam it into this other thing, image it, pull it out, and stick it back in the machine. That's how they image their software, or their computers. And so they looked at it and they said, guys, would you be willing to license that software to us? And we went, for money? And they said, yes, for money. How much would you sell us a license for that? And I kind of looked at my partner and I looked at him and I go, $50,000. And he goes, okay, deal. I'm like, what? Wow, that was the easiest sale I've ever made. And so we licensed to a division of Intel our imaging software for $50,000. What do you think we did next? We started a software company called Altiris that took that technology, and we started building out a way for companies to use that technology. And we started building a suite of other technologies around it. But again, we didn't build a technology and say, okay, let's go see if we can build a software company around it. We basically looked at it and said, here's a problem. We solved the problem, and that became, as we looked out there were a lot of companies that had that exact same problem. And so we took that, applied it to the problem, started building other technology around it, and a company was born out of that. And we actually took that technology, set a license inside of Key Labs, and we took the technology out and created a company called Altiris. And I went to Ray and I said, Ray, I think we've got another company here. Would you be willing to invest in this new company? He says, yeah, I would. What do you need? And I said, I think we need about $4 million to get this thing going. And he says, okay, I'll put the money in. So he put $4 million in. And then one of the things that I started noticing is the team that we had in place for Key Labs, some of the guys that we had brought out into Altiris, wasn't the right team to build a software company around. We really lacked some sales capability and some other talent. And at the time, I just didn't feel like I was the right guy. I'd done it for about a year and a half, and I didn't feel like I had the skills necessary to really take this company where I thought it could go. So one thing as an entrepreneur you got to do is you kind of got to find where your limits are. If you start a company and you get going, there may be a time where you say, I can't take this company to the next level. Who is it going to be? And don't be ashamed of that. Because the measurement of success in a company, in my mind, is how fat your wallet is at the end of the deal. We measure success in companies really in a lot of ways, but one of them is dollars. How valuable can we create this company, make this company as we work at it? And so I went and I knew a guy by the name of Greg Butterfield, and he's spoken here a few times, and you may even hear him later on. And I called him one day, and I says, hey, Greg, what are you doing? I'd met him a couple of times before, but he was just a really great sales guy and a really great person just in general. And I said, Greg, I got an opportunity for you. I said, what are you doing? He says, well, today's my last day at my current company. I'm going to go run sales at another organization. I says, before you do that, would you come and look at this little company I've got? I'd be willing to allow you to be president, CEO of this company, give you some equity, and let's go grow this business together. He says, I'll come and look at it. So he came over. After that, he was sold, didn't go to his other job, and came to Altiris. Best decision he ever made. And I'll tell you why here in just a second. So he came in, and he brought some other sales talent, some other folks over that would help drive the business. And one of the things that we did at Altiris, even before Greg got there, was we'd done a lot of work for Compaq Computer Corporation. And somehow one of the guys, we'd done a lot of testing for them at Key Labs. And somehow one of the product guys heard about our technology at Altiris. And he called me up and he says, listen, I'm interested in your technology. Could you fly out to PC Expo and meet us and show us your technology? I said, sure. So I went out and I showed him what we had. And he said, I want to license your software and put it on every one of our computers that we ship. Just like that. I'm like, okay. I think we can come up with some terms that would be favorable for you and for us. So think about it. They owned about 30% of all the PCs being shipped at the time, 99, 2000 timeframe. We got a deal that every one of their computers that shipped out would have our client on it. So when you plugged your Compaq computer into the network, we could manage it. That was huge. They don't do that anymore, by the way. But we got that deal. And that was the thing that changed things for us at Altiris. So 30% of the PCs in the entire world have our software on at that point. Then it was just a matter of having a team that could go out and execute on it, and that's what Greg brought to the table, was a group of guys that were just awesome at making that happen. So we started working at this. So when Greg came over, we were doing about $5 million in revenue. And we went out and bought a couple of companies to increase some of our technology. But the main thing was we wanted to go and execute on this deal with Compaq. And guess who buys Compaq a year later? HP. So now all of HP's machines are going out with our stuff on it. And guess who hates HP more than anybody in the whole world? Huh? Dell. Hate their guts. Guess who wanted our software so they could compete with HP? Dell. It was awesome. So we have HP and we have Dell. Who hates both of them as much as they hate each other? IBM. They hate those guys. So who else wanted our stuff? IBM. Who hates IBM? Fujitsu, Siemens. All of a sudden, everybody wanted to have our stuff on their computers. And we said, we can do that for you. I almost said, yes, we can, but I didn't want to get involved in the political thing. So all of a sudden, we have our software going out, and we're working with all of these big hardware manufacturers. And guess what? What do you think an HP, a Dell, and IBM, what do they want to sell the most of? Computers, right? We went into HP one time, and they said, we are having a really hard time getting people to move from our old computers to our new ones. Why do you think that was? Any ideas? Why don't you want to upgrade to a new computer? The price. What else? They're different. You got what? It's a hassle. What's the hassle? All your settings and stuff. You got this thing that feels like an old shoe, and then you want to put a brand new, really tight-fitting, stiff shoe on. People didn't like it. So we sat down with them, and they said, listen, if you guys could come up with a tool that would allow us to migrate all the settings and data off the old one, and when they turn the new one on, it looks just like their old one, we would be very, very happy. We went away and came back to them with a product called PC Transplant that did exactly that. They were blown away. If anybody's ever worked, any computer science guys here? Probably not, mostly business guys. If you ever worked in the Windows registry, it's a pain. We figured all that hard stuff out and made it really simple. We made millions of dollars off that simple little tool. But again, they identified the problem. We executed on it, came up with this little thing called PC Transplant. And guess what? We became an essential part of them moving all of their customers from their old platforms to their new ones. And then we did the same thing, gave Dell the same thing. What was really interesting is we could walk in and meet with Kevin Rollins and Michael Dell every quarter, and we could say, you know what, you sold $60 million of our software, but more importantly, we influenced $2 billion of hardware sales with our tools. You think that was interesting to Michael Dell? They were all over us. We could call them anytime, and we'd always go in and say, tell us what your next issue is. What's the next big issue that you're dealing with? We aren't selling enough servers. Why? And they would tell us, and we'd go back and come up with another solution, and we would help them sell more product. So one of the things I learned from this, and I've always been a big fan of partnering. If you want to grow your company really big, really fast, you're probably not going to be able to do it just on your own. There are some that are able to do it, but generally speaking, you got to get a big company that you can kind of draft behind. And think of it this way. Don't think of it, how am I going to get them to sell more of my stuff? Find a way that you can help them sell the stuff that matters to them. If you do that, your company will just take off. You won't have enough time or money to keep up with them because they'll drag you everywhere with them. Because their people are incentivized and paid to sell their core technology. They really don't care about selling. You know, you think of Dell, you know, $50 billion in revenue. Are they going to want to, do they care about $60 million in software revenue? That's like a rounding error for those guys. That's sad, isn't it? 60 million is a rounding error. For us, it's like, that's our whole business. But that was important. So when we got plugged into these companies and we began solving problems and we found a way to tie ourselves to their core objectives, let me show you what happened. So we start this company in '98 with $3 to $5 million in revenue. In 2007, 8 years later, 8 to 9 years later, we did $350 million in revenue. That's hard to do. If you've ever been, most of you never worked for big companies, but it's hard to go from 0 to 50 million. But to go from 0 to 350 million is really, really hard. And there's a lot of ups and downs. In the middle of that, we did a public offering. We were the first tech public offering after 9/11. We came out in May of 2002. Really, really challenging environment. We came out at $10. 2 days later, our stock was at $4. That's a little harrowing. But you know what? We focused on our business. We said, people are going to buy and sell our stock. We got to focus on hitting the numbers. We hit, I can't remember how many quarters in a row we hit, but we hit our number every quarter during that whole time we were public. And our stock continued to climb. We got up to $40. And then it fluctuates. If you've ever been in a public company, it goes up and down, and there's some pleasant things about being a public company. Most of them are fairly negative. But we found that as long as we were driving value in this business, we were going to do fine in the stock market. And then what happens is when people see how strategic you are to all these big companies, they start knocking on your door saying, we need to buy these guys. And they'll pay a premium for you. So kind of a similar thing happened. We had a lot of people starting to get interested in Altiris to buy it in 2007. And we had Novell interested in buying it. We had a couple of other systems management companies wanting to buy it. But at the end of the day, the guys from Symantec called, and they wanted to buy Altiris pretty bad. And Greg Butterfield, I was on my mission actually. I was in Nebraska on my mission when this happened, and I'll never forget when I got that call. I was in a parking lot of a little church in just out in eastern Nebraska when I got that phone call from Greg saying, "Hey, we sold the company, and it's going to be announced tomorrow." That was pretty amazing. But Symantec came in and negotiated a deal. It was about a 30% premium over what our public offering was, and it ended up being $1.2 billion. And that's the third, I believe, the third largest tech purchase in the state of Utah. Actually, second largest. We don't count the Vivint thing as a software tech company. Any Vivint guys here? Sorry. So you got Josh James' Omniture deal that was $1.8 billion. That's the biggest pure software deal. Ours was number 2. And but it was really fantastic. It was one, I would have to tell you, it was probably one of the best, it is the best company I've ever worked with. We were all focused on the same thing, trying to grow this business out and taking advantage of the things that we were really good at. And the one thing that we were really good at, I thought, was really looking to what our customers needed, coming up with solutions that solved problems for them so that they could go run their business. So when we would drop our software into a company like a Chase Bank or somebody like that, we wanted them to be able to focus on who they were as a company, and they were bankers. They shouldn't have to worry about IT stuff. So what we tried to do, our whole mantra was, how do we help people reduce the cost of managing IT infrastructure? That's what we were all about. And we started out with a few solutions, and we continued to grow that. And one of the things that I did for the company was I was in charge of, after I brought Greg in, he put me in charge of all of the M&A work. So all the buying companies, we bought 11 companies while we were there at Altiris. Some of them bigger, some of them smaller. A lot of small technology tuck-in types of things. Our biggest one was about a $75 million deal. We did a $42 million deal. But as you build your company, there's a lot of bigger companies out there that if you're doing a great job and you get a good customer base, they'll come in and pay a premium for it. And I would say, generally speaking, the best way to maximize the value of your business is you can do 2 roads. One of them is take it public, which is very painful. The second one is to be acquired. And I would suggest to you, any of you, that if you build a company, find a way to get in front of somebody that's coming right down your path. I always tell my companies I consult with now, find somebody that you could partner with that could potentially be a buyer. And if you do that, that's how you get acquired, because they become very familiar with your business. They can even help you grow your business, and then they'll be willing to pay a premium for it. And so all the companies I work with, I do business consulting now. We try to help companies do what we did and really grow their business quickly. But what we try to tell them is, when you look out there and you look at all the potential partners that you have, one of those guys could potentially buy you. And so you want to make sure that you're doing things that allows them to see the value that you have in your business. And if you play your cards right, they will come in and they'll pay a really nice premium for your business. And when they do that, guess what? No, that baby's no longer yours. And that's a little tricky, especially if you get mostly wrapped around a company and you know all the employees in there. At some point, when you get bought, it's no longer your baby anymore. And there are going to be other shareholders, other owners of the company, and they may want you to stay for a year or 2, but then you're going to be out of there, and that will be the end of your opportunity there. That's okay. You can go start another one if you want, or you can go goof off for a little bit and then go start another one. It's always fun to start a business. It's challenging. The one thing I would tell you about your career, because a lot of people say, well, what should I do? What career should I take? Path should I take? I don't really care about that personally. I think it's important that you just become very proficient at what you do. Whatever you choose to do, just become really, really good at it. You don't even necessarily have to be the very best, but you ought to be really good at what you do. So when people think of you, they'll say, that's the person I want on my team. The other day, I moderated a panel up here on go-to-market strategies at the Founders Conference. And Scott Peterson, who you all know, made a really good comment. He says, A players attract A players. And one of the things that I didn't realize is there is a big differentiator between an A and even a B player. And you might be able to get something going with some B players, but at the end of the day, you want to have A players on your team. Because if you're an A player, you don't want to have people that you have to, dragging dead bodies is no fun. You ever drug a dead body? No, it's no fun, is it? It isn't. You might want to have the authorities talk to that young man. I know it was an animal of some kind, right? Anyway, you want people that can help move the business at the same rate you're moving the business. And one of the challenges, how many of you have read any of Good to Great? Any of you here? It's a great book. If you haven't read that book, you ought to read it because it's a great view of business in general. But they have a principle in there that I think is really great. And it talks about getting the right people on the bus, the wrong people off the bus, and then the right people in the right seats in the bus. Because you may have some people in your organization that don't do really well here, but they're really awesome in this position. And that's okay. You can keep them on the bus. But anybody that doesn't fit, you just got to have them get off the bus. Otherwise, it really is going to be a detriment to your entire organization. And especially if you're the CEO or one of the executives in the company, you owe it to the rest of the team to see when you have someone that is not performing, and you have to do the hard thing and invite them to step off the bus at the next bus stop, which can be really quick. You can pull the bus over the curb at any moment and invite them to step off the bus. One thing I found is anybody that's ever left a company that I've been associated with, they've always found as good or better an opportunity somewhere else. So don't worry about that. Don't do it in a mean way, but just do it in a way that's business-like and say, you know what, this isn't working out. We're going to part ways. We appreciate all you've done, and we wish you well in your new endeavors, and then go on to the next thing. But don't you dare sit around and put up with low performance in your organization. It will haunt you as a CEO or a leader, because if you aren't leading and everybody's counting on you to lead, that's a problem. I'll never forget the first time I went to a big company party at Altiris, and there was like 500 people at this party. And I felt the weight of every family that was at that and looking at us as a management team and saying, we are trusting that you're going to take us in the right direction. Wait till you feel that. It's pretty dramatic. But don't ever limit your ability to move forward as a company because you feel you don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. Make sure you make good decisions based on good data and based on performance. And it's all about performance in a real growing company. So make sure that you're one of the A players. If you're an A player, you'll always have a place to land. Because really, they're not few and far between, but they're limited. There's a limited number of really top-notch people. And that's why I say it's important that you're just very proficient. Okay, last thing I'm going to share with you is a thing that Ray Norda taught me about business. And he called it the 5 E's of business. And this is a great little thing to write down if you got something to write with, because I learned a lot from this. Where's my water at, Michael? Can I just get right there real quick? Thank you. Anyway, he had a great way of just kind of telling these little stories, and he'd always come up with these little acronyms and stuff. But this is one that he shared with us that has always stuck with me. The 5 E's of business. When you first start a business, there's a lot of excitement. People they're excited to get a new business going, and they're willing to dive in and help out, and they'll do anything they can to help drive the business. So excitement is the first one. The next one is enthusiasm. Boy, people are willing to stay all hours of the day and night to make this business successful. They are so enthusiastic. They're telling everybody about this great new company that they got involved with, and just really enthusiastic. Then the next word is exuberance. That's the third E. You probably don't even know how to spell that. I don't either, so I can't help you. Try your spell checker on it. Exuberance, boy, we are starting to roll now. We have got customers. They love us. They love our technology. We're starting to see things written up on the internet, in the publications, that we're the smartest people on the planet. Boy, we are really, really moving this company along. That's the third E, exuberance. The next one, and the one you never want to get to, is euphoria. Now that starts with an E. EU, euphoria. And the euphoria stage is this. Simply put, we have arrived. One of the companies I consult with, their CEO sent out an email to his employees the other day and said, "We have arrived." Guess what I sent him? I sent him the 5E story. And I never got a response back from any of the executives. Everybody got really quiet and they went back to work, which I thought was really good. But exuberant or euphoria is all the really expensive cars start showing up in the parking lot. We've arrived. People start coming in at 9 and leaving at 3. And nothing can stop us. And the reason why you never want to get to the fourth E, because the fifth E is right behind it. Extinction. I guarantee you, if you ever get to the euphoric stage, you will rapidly decline as a company, and eventually you'll go out of business. I hope you never get there, because it's no fun. I've seen a lot of companies do this. And before they can get any value of the company, it's gone so far down that there's no value left. Sometimes it sells for a little bit. Sometimes it just kind of lingers around for 10 years, and maybe they turn it around, maybe they don't. But it's important that you hang on to those basic fundamentals. Anyway, it's been really great to be with you today. And I guess there's a little Q&A session upstairs. What room is that in, Michael? 710. There's some goodies up there. I'm going to be there if you want to answer, do a little Q&A, and then have fun. Watch the debate tonight, and good luck.